Hello, and welcome to this training presented by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada, titled Mourning the Loss of a Healthy Life for Patients and Their Families. My name is Natasha Sani, and I'm the Community Service Lead for the BC and Yukon region at the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada. Before we begin our main presentation, I'd like to share with you our mission and present some resources that might be useful to you and the people you support. At the LSC, our mission is to cure blood cancers and improve the quality of life of those touched by blood cancer and their families. We listen attentively and with compassion to the challenges our community faces, pointing them to the information specific to the type of blood cancer or treatment they have. We help them get organized to manage and take charge of their care and identify services that would be beneficial for them. Please visit www.bloodcancers.ca to find the contact information of the community service lead in your area. We also offer a continuing education program that you can join free of charge. You can register to one or more trainings that you can do at your own pace and receive an electronic certificate. They are all offered by experts. There are more than 1,500 healthcare professionals using the platform and over 40 trainings available. We have trainings on blood cancer, treatments, the psychosocial aspects of cancer, and more. We are continually adding to our trainings. Available online are all of our educational tools and resources. These are vetted by experts for all the main types of blood cancer, treatments and secondary effects, mental health and wellness, and much more. Our material is available in multimedia formats to address the variety of audiences, for example, children, parents, caregivers, and people touched by blood cancer. They include digital disease booklets, fact sheets, podcast episodes, animated videos, and webcast recordings. By visiting our website, you can place an order for materials that will be sent directly to your cancer center or clinic. Materials that can be ordered include disease booklets, service posters, and palm cards, and much more. It's all easy to do and free of charge. Most of our educational material can also be downloaded through our website. With this handy electronic form, you can order materials to be shipped to your location in just a few clicks. If you have any questions, please reach out to the community service lead in your region. We are always happy to help. Emotional and practical support is a priority for us at the LSC. Our peer support program has been identified as a key service, but many don't know about it. Trained volunteer survivors who are 1 year post-treatment share their stories with those newly diagnosed or those facing a new treatment. Age, gender, diagnosis, and treatment are considered to ensure the best possible match. This program helps to build hope, alleviate anxiety, and create realistic expectations. We also have a professionally facilitated virtual support group. These support groups are offered coast to coast. It provides opportunity to the blood cancer community to connect with others who are facing similar challenges from the comfort of their own home. Each participant builds connection through group discussions, sharing coping methods, information, and helping break isolation. You can visit our website, www.bloodcancers.ca, or reach out to the community service in your region to learn more. It is now time to introduce our speaker today, Danielle Imbeault. Danielle lived abroad for close to 20 years and made her career after nursing in the pharma industry, working in a different role, but finding her passion in learning and development. Danielle is also the proud grandmama of an adorably mischievous 3-year-old munchkin who has her wrapped around tiny fingers. When she's not navigating the intricacies of healthcare and helping grieving families, you'll find her steering the ship of her part-time career as a travel agent. Yes, she can not only diagnose your ailments, but also prescribe the perfect vacation. She's also a sailing aficionado who dreams of conquering the Caribbean waters like a modern-day pirate. Over to you, Danielle.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this kind introduction. It's a very pleasure to be with you today and to talk about mourning the loss of a healthy life for the patient and their family that you're supporting. This presentation will give you some tools, some approaches in which you can use when you're interacting and communicating with the patients and families that have either cancer, but you can also approach, and you'll see, we'll talk about this through the program. This is an approach, and these are tools that you can use in many, many different ways. So the learning objectives that I wanted to discuss with you today is really about distinguishing between what is loss, transition, and grief, and being able for you to support the individual and make sure that they can adapt their illness through a dual and even more than a dual approach. Our agenda will be about divided into two parts. The first part will be about what is the theory of those approaches. Grieving our healthy life is making sure that we can make differences in the terms that we use. We're going to talk about the systemic approach. We're going to talk about the stage approach, their definition, how the principle of both of them, and why they complement each other. We're also going to talk about integration and adaptability within these systems. We're also going to talk about intervention because I think one of the strength is to gather insights when you're listening to those webinars, but also find ways that you can use these tools. It's one thing for me to give you the theory. It's another thing to be able to take it with you and test it and try it and see the kind of results and then adapt it. So we're going to talk about interventions, and I'm going to give you tools that you could use. So let's start with part one. Part one is really about making sure that we understand the terms, but also what it means for you and for your patient. So we use transition, loss, and grief. Unfortunately, we use it interchangeably, but they're different. And loss and grief is often used in the same sentence, but they just don't mean the same thing. So if we take transition, it's really a change or a shift from one stage, situation, or an environment. You have to remember that they can be voluntary, like, for example, like you're moving from a job to the other, or involuntary, which is happening when there's adjusting to a life change, to an illness. And not all transition will involve a loss. Sometimes that transition is really happy. It's a thing that you're looking forward, like maybe taking your retirement. Unfortunately, some of those transitions have an effect on your family. They will disrupt your routines and sometimes even though your relationship. When we talk about loss, we have a definition that says it's the parting or renunciation that may happen within a transition. So it's the experience of being deprived of someone or something. It can also trigger, and well, often triggers an emotional response that can be marked by sadness, yearning, a sense of emptiness, because then suddenly all of this has this emotional component because you're losing maybe a job, a relationship, or like here, your health. Grief is the emotional journey of processing and coping with the loss that we just talked about. So grief is actually the natural response to loss. And as you know, it involves a lot of range of emotion, emotional, cognitive, physical. And the grief is also the process of you or your patient adjusting to the reality of that loss. And these feelings are sometimes difficult to identify. And the insights of the tools that we're going to talk today will help you identify the stages and help you identify the systemic system of your patient's family or social environment. We have to remember also that everything is moving. It's a wave, and transition is really the broader change. The loss is departing, and the grief is the emotional journey of processing and coping with that loss. So I hope that makes it clear for you. What I would love to talk to you about today is about the different lenses and combining different lenses to get yourself a better focus. It will enhance the support that you can give to your patients and to their family. Because grief is not just limited to the patient. It's the family, it's the system, it's the social environment. All of these people, and that's why we call it a system, all the people that are navigating around your family and your patient, they have their own version of the loss or the grief that they're going through. For example, a patient that's mourning their autonomy of being sick with ALL, for example, well, the family will grieve the altered role and routine within their lives that they're feeling. So the ripple effect of grief is extensive. And I think it's a great way for us today, by exploring those approaches, that you will be able to share a better experience and a better support of your supporting these family through these approaches and tools. So I'd like to start with you with the Kubler-Ross approach. So many of you probably have heard Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has an approach that's called about stage of grief. What is very specific about her framework is that she outlines 5 stages, and she focuses on the individual psychological process of grieving. And just quickly, I'll remind you what they are: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And what is the patient that's going through when they're losing or they feel they're losing something? It is stages by stages, but it's not linear. And you can go back from one stage to the other depending of the environment and what happens in your life. They're not strictly linear. And it's not a sequence of different stages, but they help you identify exactly where that individual is in regards to their loss. As Kubler-Ross is centering on the individual internal emotion, it's less about the relationship of the system. And when I'm saying system, I'm talking about everybody that surrounds your patient. The ability to recognize the grief as a process is really interesting because it will give you insights as to where that patient lives and is responding. In practice, really, like, for example, for oncology, a patient with a terminal diagnosis might move from denial, saying that they have a disbelief, they don't understand. Maybe they think that their symptoms was due to stress. They don't believe the diagnosis just happened. Then becomes into an anger. They're frustrated. They can't work. Maybe they can't even provide for their family. And then they'll start bargaining, finding ways. How can I control what's happening? How can I give something to get something else? Then they might go into a depression and eventually will accept. But even though we put all these stages together and they seem linear, a patient will, or an individual will move from one stage to the other. So this really is the Kubler-Ross approach. The second approach that I would like to talk to you about is what we call the systemic approach. And the systemic approach, it focuses on the relationship of the system. And again, remember the system is really everybody that surrounds the patient and its family. The strength of the systemic approach is really to consider the patient, their family, in a larger environment. So it views the individual's experience, his illness, his loss, not in an isolation way, but as being deeply interconnected with the family dynamic, but also with your healthcare teams and the social environment. I like to see it as an holistic perspective. It can emphasize the importance of understanding how each member of the family or the network will respond to the illness. The well-being of your patient and of his family, with this approach, you can focus on supporting everyone and making sure that that social connection is strong. The intervention also that you will apply will support this systemic approach. My take on it as well is the emotional and behavioral dynamics, the understanding of the dynamics provides you a way to involve everybody's insight, but everybody's history that weaves through it brings you a different way to approach and support. The systemic approach has principles, and these are listed on that slide: the system dynamics, the feedback and complexity, the equivalence, the balance and adaptation, and the ripple effect. And we talked about this earlier, but think about those principles as being the core of how you can approach the system. So the dynamic obviously it impacts everybody. The feedback and complexity is making sure that you understand the interconnection and the loops sometimes, because sometimes it becomes circular and you need to be able to understand through that system. Different causes can lead to something different. And we all know that even though there's a different cause that can lead to the same effect, the importance of the context and the flexibility doesn't bring you to the same thing. There's a balance. Our mind wants to stay balanced. Our mind wants to adapt and wants to stay within a balance feeling. However, what happens through our system is that they impact the way that we are our own balance, and we need to adapt to what's happening to us, but we also have to realize that our system is also adapting and providing their own balance within that system. So that's also very interesting. For me, let me push you to the next slide. I think it's important to look at the key difference of those approaches. And the intervention, the systemic approach, really involves the family, like I said, but it's more about understanding the individual emotion. The holistic versus stage-based. Your holistic way, I love the word holistic, and I use it within that context very often, is because I think sometimes we forget as health practitioner, yes, we have a patient in front of us, but their grief is being impacted by all their different experience, but it will also be impacted by all the family and their social environment, how they have viewed loss or grief before. And that emotional experience impacts everybody. When the illness strikes a family or a system, both the patient and their family experience profound change. And the loss or the mourning that follows is often not just limited to the physical loss of the health. It can extend to the loss of the life they once knew. And I think it's important to take a moment to figure out how this patient and their family is experiencing, because they may lose, the patient may, as you know, lose their autonomy, the control, their vitality, maybe the way they were doing sport, their routine, the way they do their work. But the family will mourn alongside them. They will grieve not only for the patient that is healed, but also for their own altered life. Has the role shift, routine changes, and uncertainty sets in, and everyone involved is thrust into a process of mourning as well. So it's really important to think about that ripple effect. So now that we've talked about both stages and the key difference, I want to take you down to maybe you've heard this sentence often is, cancer does not define you. But does it? And I think as we look at those approaches, we need also to think about, what is our patient going through these different stages? Obviously, there's this diagnosis and a treatment. Hopefully, they will go into a remission, a recovery. They might even go into a recurrence of a cancer. And unfortunately, they can also go end out with in palliative care and ultimately death. The diagnosis and the treatment, that initial phase is when the illness is identified, often is marked by emotional shock and significant life adjustment. Obviously, wow, I didn't expect that. I didn't think that was this. I thought that was my stress. I saw this bump, but it didn't mean anything. It's that shock across the system. The remission is that period of temporary recovery or stability where the patient may feel hope, but a lot also of fear of a potential recurrence. The terminal phase is obviously characterized by the progression of that disease and the end of life, where additional emotional, physical, and familial support might be needed. The breakdown of the loss of a healthy life in those three stages, I believe by using these two tools or these two approaches that we're talking about, brings you insight that there is a cost to being vulnerable. There is a cost to being sick. And I think it's good to remember that even though we're saying it doesn't define you, actually it changes, it forever changes your patient. The collateral impact of it, that speaks of the patient and their whole self, but of partners and children and parents and family and colleagues and friends. It has a direct impact on all of these relationships. It changes the way that who you know, your role as a patient, and you were my wife, but today you're not my wife anymore, you're my caregiver. That role changes. The collateral aspect of it brings trauma. It redefines identity. It redefines relationships. And at work, it changed the way your colleagues or your employer will see you or interact with you. Maybe because you're not as productive as you were, or maybe you're doing a new job to be able to secure income, but that's another loss that you're also living. And it stretches, that collateral and ripple effect stretches and strains your normality. it kind of turns everything's upside down and inside out, I would say. So if we're looking at how and why, we're also looking at the integration and the regain of your balance. So two things that we're going to talk that I think is very important when we're gonna move into part two as to how you can intervene is the integration and adaptation that help regain balance for your family and for their system. Integration in every phases, the goal is really to integrate the illness into their life. It's not as the whole life, but it is part of it. And it will always be there. The shift that they will make through the different phases of their disease, the family and the patient, even though they will feel many emotions through that, they will need to integrate the illness, but also the stage of the illness. The adaptation about the change that going through when you have a chronic illness will give you, as I said, new roles and routine and realities. And each of them, if we support them properly, will give them the strength and the purpose, even though this is a really, really difficult time. The adaptation to that illness through the different approach that we'll talk today in the second part of our presentation will give you insights, but will also give you tools to help them adapt to this new reality. The part two is really about intervention. You, as a healthcare provider, healthcare practitioner, as part of the system. Remember combining the two lenses for clear focus that I showed you a little bit earlier? It's to effectively, I believe, to effectively play your role within a systemic approach, you will need to be equipped to navigate these dynamics of the system with as many tools as you can. And I believe that by understanding the changes, the stages of grief, and understanding the approach of the systemic way of looking at your patient and his family and his entourage, brings you as a facilitator an understanding and insight into very practical and essential information. It will allow you to identify and validate the emotional responses of both your patient and of his system. It might help you identify conflict within the patient, family, and social arena. It will guide some of your communication, provide you maybe more empathy, or at least provide your patient and his system with more empathic response. It will tailor your intervention into that system so that it's not just the patient that you're trying to help, but his entire family unity. And I think the biggest strength of that is it empowers the system itself to adapt and build resilience. By understanding the grief and understanding the system, the facilitator becomes now like a trusted guide, and it helps the system move from being completely dysfunctional, well, that's a word, or disarray, to a place of balance, collaboration, and growth. It helps you challenge the current situation, but also challenge what the future could look like. And that will bring you this information. If you look at the system, and obviously I will not go through every single one of those, but I wanted to give you two slides in which it identifies you as the facilitator, you as the help provider, help practitioner, what can you do, but also why it matters. So I'll give you the first one as an example. If you identify and can validate the emotion of the system, what does that do? Well, it matters because the grief impacts both the system, as I said, but because everybody is experiencing this emotional change differently, by asking and validating the emotion of both the patient and their system, you're able to make interconnection. You also can demonstrate empathy because you need to be into these approaches with a non-judgmental space. And this is very hard. And one of the reasons it's hard is because you as an individual have your own experiences as what is loss. You have experienced loss in different ways. You have found ways to deal with your loss. Your experience will come up when you're dealing and supporting families. So sometimes it's really important to be aware, but also figure out how can I be the most non-judgmental with my interaction with my patient and their family. The second slide I'd love to show you that I prepared also for you as part of that system. I'm sorry, it went too far. Is here talks about the system in the systemic approach of that we've talked about earlier. But how can you, as a facilitator or support system or support specialist or health provider, how can you encourage the communication, but also how can you believe in the competence of the system to actually resolve and reinforce their own strength and build their own resilience? And all of this is available to you because you can, for example, act as a mirror. You can help address issues that might seem to hinder or you're identifying conflicts. You're able to go back to the system to try to understand what they are. And there's a terms that has been used about being a tutor of resilience. And actually, I love this term because it shows you how you can strengthen the confidence in the face of difficulties. But you, as a guide within that system, can help people adapt. How can you do that? Is by using the tools that are available to you to find information, to gather all your story that is much more than what you just see. It's by asking questions, by telling the system, the patient system, how they can also ask questions. For example, the wife can go back to her husband, and even though it's really difficult, she needs to understand how the patient is really feeling towards maybe he's in remission. Does he have any fear? What is the impact on him right now? The easy way would be, oh, I'm feeling really cool. I'm feeling very happy. I'm in remission. Sometimes we can ask the system to gather insight as well by asking the right question. The questions that we as health professional, we are being taught how to do, how to listen, how to ask the right question, and the open-ended question. We can also show our system, the system, how to do it. And what I'd love to do right now is talk to you about a couple of tools. And the toolbox that you have is, I mean, there's so many toolbox. There's so many tools within a toolbox. But I'll show you a couple of them that I think are really useful. And through a case studies at the end that you'll have some information about, you'll see how they are interconnected. But the most important thing before applying any of those tools, please make sure you understand the specific needs and the goal of the individual or the group that you're following. Obviously, a clear request is what you want to have, but sometimes the request is not as clear, and you need to make sure that you clearly identify why is the patient, why is the family here. Sometimes they come to you of their own free will. Sometimes they will be with you because they are looking for support, but sometimes they're into our system, as you know, they're into the hospital, and we go and see them without being invited into their circle. We need to make sure that we engage in very active listening to clarify how we can help and support the family, and also confirm that we can give them tools to help them. Sometimes they might not be receptive at the time that you're going to be there. And I'm sure that all of you have been in a situation. Our help is not always something that the patient needs at that time. And it's important, obviously, to make sure that we check with the patient, we check with the family. Are we in a space where we can support each other? I mean, support the patient and their family by giving them tools. But if not, we just come back. But make sure that you clearly understand where you are before you apply any of your tools. It will be a defining success, and the effort that we put in will be amplified. So one of the tools that I would love to talk to you today is, and I'm sure you've seen it, and there's different ways, but and different templates of how this tool can be used. It's called the Wheel of Life. And the one I find really useful and impactful is the spider one and the colored one. The Wheel of Life assessment usually has 8 categories, although you can, and you'll have a template that you could use. It's really you can adapt it to the client's desire, but also divide it into subcategory if you need to. But the category can be changed and the worded can be adapted to each client and his family. But it's a platform for a very rich conversation. It's a visual tool that allows you to see and assess the different areas of your life by using colors. And what they do is they look at every segment that might be important for them, and you ask them to rate their satisfaction of that segment from a scale from 1 to 10. And what they do is they, like the last visual, they color that segment as to where they feel they could rate that segment. And obviously that it's a snapshot of that person's current situation. But if you look at it, it's an amazing door to conversation, and it highlights maybe areas where you think you could have a significant impact, but sometimes the questions that you might have of maybe the importance of it is not so important for him or for that patient. And even though there's another segment that may be so high, gives you some insight as to, oh, maybe there's imbalance there. Maybe I need, if he's rating my satisfaction at 10 into my relationship, but at my colleagues and peers at 3, you might think, okay, they're not too satisfied with that area. Let me ask more questions. Let me figure out why. And for the patient, how amazing that visual becomes to him. And you could use also the spider by linking all of them, making it even more impactful. Remember, this is a tool that you could use with the patient. but you also can use it with the system. So you could use it with his partner, maybe for an adult child, so that you can gather all these insights. The next tool that I would like to propose is the life's timeline. And there are many, many examples of those. But the one I like, I showed you here, is one that's divided by the highlights in your life and the challenges or the difficult time in your life within a life timeline. So one side are the challenges, the other side of the highlights of your life. And the purpose is really to help the patient and his family gain perspective on their past experience and how have these shaped their current functioning. And identifying recurrent patterns and strengths and opportunity for them to grow within the system. It's easy to use. Like I said, there's many different ways of doing it. But if you look at the bottom image, the fact that you're linking that through the timeline of their life, it shows how our life has ups and downs, and their situation right now with their chronic illness will also be with ups and downs. And the self-awareness of it is amazing. But for me, it's for them to be able to realize the resilience that they've have experienced throughout their life and what they've done with the big difficult time and challenges through their life, and asking them, wow, how can you apply all this experience that you've had throughout your life? How can whatever you've learned, whatever was helpful, how can you use it today with your illness? Again, the snapshot of the first one that gives you those 8 segments, this timeline doesn't become a snapshot. It becomes your past and your future. And again, this brings you additional insights. I believe that both tools can be used for the patient, but also for the systems, for the partner. Again, like I said, for the adult children. And I can give you an example, and this is one of the case studies that I've talked, that I will leave you with at the end of this webinar. Because all of us have experienced of loss or challenges during our life, whenever a new experience come up, we may decide to react a certain way, either by protecting us or protecting the person, or maybe our partner that is sick. These gives you insight. And what better way to try to put these interconnectivity together? So another tool. I thought that maybe also I could provide you with different tools that you may know. A genogram, which is the mapping of the family dynamic relationship. Not really about the medical. I'm not talking about a genogram of a medical situation of your family. Do you have any diabetes or high blood pressure? But more about, in one mapping, being able to see each and every role, each and every person that is part of that family dynamic or relationship, and what is the role that they play in the patient's life. How is it impactful? Well, you might gather a lot of insights from maybe the loss of somebody else within that family system. It could be about maybe being adopted. Maybe it's about losing somebody. It might be about being out of work for so long and you're being helped by your parents. I'm talking about a younger adult. All of this relationship mapping becomes known to you through using a genogram. There's also other relationship and organizational tasks that you can put. These are tools that you can show patient how to use schedule, how to use um, uh, an emotional wheel, how to use the value that brings that family together. How can you do a charter? These are all different tools that obviously, you're not a counselor, but you're there, part of that system. You can provide guidance. And obviously, all these tools are available to you, and you might not know exactly how to use them. But be curious and try to figure out and go ask other professional how you can help your family by gathering this kind of information. The next one I want to talk to you about is what if you have children? What if you have to support children? These are obviously, well, not obviously, but maybe you do know the Inside Out movies. They've created from them, there's a lot of tools that have been identified to help the caregivers and help professional to identify the feelings of the kiddos. And the pie chart and the identify of the emotion, they become really, really handy. And I wanted to take also this opportunity to talk about a new tool that is called the symptom screening in pediatric tools. And I'm saying new, it's not new, but here Dr. Lillian Song from the Sick Kids in Toronto, she just made sure that the study that she did using that tool is now being available to all of us um, as a very impactful tool to address the emotion and how the kids can express what they're feeling and how we can support them better. It's called Speedy, and I will leave you the references in it. But I thought that was really amazing that here in Canada we do things for our pediatric patient, and we spend time wanting to understand more of how we can support them and the experience of what is bothering the children or what is impacting their resilience, finding tools to screen their experience. So I'll let you on that one. The last one, you might have done this yourself in different, it's called really the Chinese portrait. And the Chinese portrait is really a metaphor description of oneself through a comparison of different things. So an animal, an object, a place. If you were an animal, what would you be? If you were a character in a movie, what would you be? The main idea is really to help the child introduce themselves or their illness to you using these parallels. And that formula of using if I was, it creates a connection and it does an activity that is fun. And if you stop and look at those answers, you get to know them better. I like to do it also when I do this. I like to do it with them and I play the role as well. So it's like a peer interview. So they provide information and I answer as well. Obviously, they don't need to know me in that specific, but it creates a connection and it creates the beginning of a trust as well, because suddenly they get to know you. So don't forget about playing the game as well when you're playing with children. The more you can give them the space of trust, the better it is for you to gather those insights that you're looking for. That gave you, I think, an idea of why both approaches or all the approaches, obviously the stage approach and the systemic approach, how this interconnectivity is so important. The knowledge that you get from understanding where that patient is or that family is into their grief and their loss will give you insight as to how you can help them through the system. They're not alone. They each have their own experience, their own emotion, their own need through the illness of the patient. And for you to be able to gather everything together gives you a wealth of information. I'd like to leave you with two case studies. I call them case studies, but it's really just to give you very a quick ideas on how we applied those approaches. One is one with a child and the other one was with an adult. And please remember, the full case study will also be available to you. So Sophie is a 10-year-old diagnosed with a brain tumor, and her 8-year-old brother, Nathan, both of them are navigating a complex emotional landscape with obviously their parents. What we notice is Sophie has a very protective instincts that often leads her to prioritize Nathan's well-being while not taking care of her, or actually not even making sure that she express her own fears and vulnerabilities. She kind of hides that. And their parents are struggling with anticipatory grief. To the future, looking to the future. What is, oh my God, will I be losing my daughter? She has such a poor prognosis. What's going to happen to our family dynamic? Balancing the caregiving responsibility while trying to provide stability to both their children. And Nathan in all of this is very confused and very anxious about his sister condition, obviously. But he needs reassurance. He needs clarity, and not a lot of people within that system is giving them. How did they find, that health professional? What did she do? She used the emotional wheel and the Chinese portrait with both Nathan and Sophie to be able to uncover some insight, and they were able to figure out that actually Sophie's desire to appear strong like a lion, and Nathan's longing for safety and unity, they were able to address Sophie's need for reassurance, need to be able to address Sophie's need to take her place. And yes, she wants to be strong for Nathan, but she needs to be strong for herself. So they've provided as well some informal play therapy. They used the storytelling with that family, and that resilience and the way they were able to change the way they expressed the emotion changed the dynamic of the family, even given Nathan the space that he felt he didn't have because his sister was sick all the time. Gave them this increased interest, not interest, but insight. The last one I'd like to talk to you about is of an adult. His name is John, and John was a 42-year-old father that was diagnosed with ALL, and his family faced really profound challenges that stem from his illness. And while John was transitioning through the stage of his own grief, there was a lot of denial in the beginning, to at one point being able to accept new therapy, because his wife was trying to be at learning more information about what was going on with John. But Sarah, his wife, was assuming the role, obviously, of a caregiver, a very strong anchor, but was also being a little bit distant, very self-controlled, And if you had looked at it, just from a first overview, you felt like maybe Sarah was very equipped to deal with her husband's illness. However, what they've realized is that distance and that need to control was actually showing an anticipatory grief and fear, because it happens that Sarah had lost her dad to lung cancer when she was 25. And what she was seeing now is that she might be losing her husband, that the way that she wanted to approach it is that if I stay behind, if I stay removed, and if I'm act as the perfect wife, and show this control, maybe she won't be hurt as much as she was when she lost her dad. So this information was actually uncovered when the L professional used the genogram. So the struggle that she was facing was highlighted by exploring that family dynamic and the history. Their children also, so John had two children, Emily that was 12 and Jacob that was 9. They responded in a different way, and Emily was showing sign of withdrawal as well, but Jacob was seeking straightforward answer and emotional reassurance, which they were not getting. John had his own issues and his own his energy was all about getting himself better, and his wife and the Sarah, the mom, all her energy was being put into, okay, I need to be in control. I need to keep the family together. But they were not able to figure out how to help this family navigate their journey in more unity by using the genogram, by using the stage, by using the systemic approach. The intervention after that was so much more impactful. They were able to offer Sarah some counseling. They were able to find some age-appropriate tools for both Emily and Jacob through play therapy. But what happened was that it reduces Sarah's caregiving burden and also create this family unity. So again, as you can see, the more approaches and the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the more holistic way that you're doing your support to the family, the better insight that you gain. So this brings me to the end of this webinar about mourning the loss of a healthy life. And I'd like to leave you with the fact that this is a profound and real challenge for a patient and their family. And as they navigate the grief and the transition it brings, the combination of the insights that you will get, the way that you'll be able to validate the emotion of both your family and your patient, it will give you a fuller understanding of their story. Grief is very, very complex. Loss is very, very complex. But with understanding, we really can guide them through a very difficult journey towards a resilience and integration. So don't be afraid to try new things. Every tool doesn't work for every patient or family. I think it's a try is what is important. And also to be very open about the fact that you're trying new things. You're trying to get more information, and your support through that system of that patient that is suddenly into a disarray. The reality is it's deeply personal. Grief is deeply personal for everybody involved in the system. So be an active listener. Try to gather the information with all many different tools, and just be open to the results. Just remember that everything that you try, everything that you learn from that family and from that system brings you an outcome that you would not have been able to have if you had not even tried a little bit of something new. So thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure, and I hope this was useful for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for this presentation. To you who are listening to us, I hope you enjoyed it as well. We invite you to access the continuing education platform to view our other training courses. And finally, I'd like to remind everyone that we are here for the blood cancer community. So please don't hesitate to order our tear pads for free or to contact us if you need any information or support. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.